Well, hello, everybody. This is Manny Aragon from the Rolf Workshop Center for Structural Performance, and welcome to this installment of the 2014 Endurance Summit. Each time we've got fabulous guests, and today is no different. We've got this is going to be a very interesting and fun conversation, and I think you'll really enjoy it, hopefully get some great tools out of it. Today's guest is Bill Morris. Bill's the CEO of a company called thetotalathlete.com. It's a conference and seminar company that helps guide athletes and coaches with outstanding education and motivation to be the best they can be. Bill's a bit of his history. He grew up just outside New York City, and you'll find that he's got a really, really quick mind. It's such a pleasure talking to him, and you'll see that he's actually undergraduate, completed his undergraduate degree at my sister's alma mater, Boston College, and he studied finance, did his graduate MBA at Manhattan College in International Business. By his early 30s, he was chosen to head international finance of one of the top-tier investment banks on Wall Street, Kidder Peabody, responsible for all financial and operational activity in London, Paris, Geneva, Zurich, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. I mean, wow, what was I doing in my early 30s? I think I was just, plugging away. It was during this time of his career that his two sons were born. Certainly a life-changing event, and he also became involved with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And this is really neat. Bill became an executive board member and fundraiser for the foundation and began his enhanced career helping kids. Bill created, conducted, and was prime participant in a sit-up-a-thon to raise funds for terminally ill children for 5 consecutive years while on Wall Street. So here's the juicy stuff, guys. Bill set a world record for completing 20,100 consecutive sit-ups in 11 hours and 32 minutes. Quick commentary. Some of you guys take longer to complete an Ironman. This guy did 20,100 sit-ups in 11 hours and 32 minutes. This led Bill to speaking at high schools and universities and pro sports teams on fitness and various other topics. But Bill wanted to reach all kids, not just athletes, and so he designed a program called The Formula for Success. This program shows all kids how to get it together mentally, physically, and spiritually, and hopefully it helps endurance athletes as well. And I'm pretty confident that it's going to, not just kids, but endurance athletes as well. For the past 20 years, Bill has been speaking, educating, and motivating audiences from kids incarcerated in rehab, foster homes, halfway homes, boys and girls clubs, big brothers and sisters, obese camps, continuation high schools, to speaking at the World Drug Conference, West Point and Stanford University, and the New York Knicks. His motto in life is live, earn, and return, and is currently an adjunct professor at the Business School at UCI. Currently, Bill is training for the next American Ninja Warrior, a fitness TV show on NBC. And wow, Bill, I mean, you've just got so much here. But I'm going to jump right to the juicy part because that's, there's so much more to this. But you've had so many things that you've done over the years, and it just, sometimes when your resume is that long, it's hard to really sink your teeth into everything that's there. But
right.
There's a whole bunch of really, I guess, for the folks who are on the call, things in the endurance and strength category that are things that have never been done before. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe the marquee here, 20,100 sit-ups, and how that came about?
Sure.
The whole deal. Tell us more.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's first, Manny, I want to say thank you very much for having me on the program. This is wonderful. The whole thing with Sit-Up-a-thon was one day my kids and I were watching something on television, and it had to do with terminally ill kids, and my kids were at that time probably, 5 and 6, somewhere in that zone, and they said I was looking at it like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that my kids are healthy. And so I turned to them and I said, you know what, I'm going to do a fundraiser for them. And they said, yeah, great, Dad, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know yet. So I thought about it and I said, I'll figure something out. And I said, you know what, I'm going to create a sit-up-a-thon. And so I started off with, researching the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I wanted to make sure it was a solid organization where the money actually reached the kids. So I asked them if I could come down and audit their books, and they said, yes, you can. So I did, and I realized that over 92 cents on the dollar reached the kids. And so that's how it kind of began. But the one thing you have to know that is the first year, I did 5,000 sit-ups, and we raised only $5,000. The second year, it was 10,000. The third year was 15,000, and then the fourth year was 20,100. What a lot of people don't know is the fifth year I actually did 25,000, but I don't really talk about that because, the 5, 10, 15, and 20 were all consecutive, no stops. And on the 25, I took a couple potty breaks. But the main thing is we raised well over $150,000 for the kids, and that's really what it was all about. These are kids that are faced with life-threatening illnesses, and they're just amazing. They don't ask for much, and sometimes it's to meet an athlete, sometimes it's to have a computer. It's just a wonderful organization.
It's amazing how having a child or children can change your perspective on life. And it's not that wouldn't have come up before, but it's so much more. It's just right there when your kids are sitting there and you're watching this and you're thinking, wow, I mean, what took you from, inaction to action on that? Most of us sit there and we see things, but we think, oh, I should do that. But what got you into action to actually, making the commitment to yourself and getting into action to do that?
You know what it is, Manny, I really kind of believe that in an expression it says to try and fail is one thing, but to fail to try is another. And I don't mind failing. In fact, I always say to my audiences, the only way to get to the door of success is through the door of failure. You have to try and not be, go into despair when it doesn't work for you. That's part A. Part B is not listening to other people. Sometimes people, give you an example. Here's a perfect example. After I did the 5,000 sit-ups, the next year I did the 10,000. And I had a guy come up to me, and he said to me, he goes, Bill, are you going to double it? And so he's trying to just say, you're not going to be able to do that because you're going to double your number. And so his where he was coming from was to put a negative thought in my head. And I'll tell you, Manny, that was the last time I let negative thoughts ever affect me. It affected me for about 48 hours. And then I said, gosh, this guy doesn't know me. He doesn't know how hard I trained. He doesn't know what I eat. He doesn't know how I sleep. He doesn't know anything about me. But he's putting a negative thought in his head because he couldn't do it. So I basically flush that. So when somebody gives me a negative thought, it just does not register with me. I kind of smile and go, you have no idea. So, on that note, it's just the power of what I call PMA, or the positive mental attitude. And there are so many people out there. So all the endurance athletes that you'll be talking to, they're in a very elite bucket of folks on the planet. They're in the 0.1%. So if you really think about it and analyze it, who are they going to go to for advice? 99.5% of the people out there either A, don't understand them, B, couldn't comprehend them, and C, almost really, just don't care. So you kind of have to stay within your own community and really within your own head.
Very, very wisely said, and that's exactly why I wanted you to come on and the program and share some advice because it is. I mean, even on the beginner level, it's a rarefied atmosphere. You're absolutely right. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Can you talk a little bit more about the positive mental attitude? Because I can tell you from firsthand experience, and I'm sure this happens to every athlete, but this has been something that's come really to the forefront for me recently in my more recent races, is the mental strength aspect of it, where I get to say there's always a point in a race, but for me lately it's been at the end of the race, the kind of last stretch, where not the sprint stretch, but just before that, where you know, I just feel like I'm about to fall apart, and and I'm really on the edge. And I have had a couple of races where I have fallen apart for a moment, and even stopped or walked or whatever. And there's been some where I've kept it together. But how do you, you know, when you're doing, you know, 25,000 or 20,100 steps, how do you keep yourself together to be able to continue to do that and not stop?
Well, it's a combination of a couple things, Manny. Let's start with getting prepared. On a preparation basis, you know, I didn't just drop down and do 20,000 sit-ups. You know, I worked up to it. You know, so my methodology is build your numbers and then build your sets. You know, very much like a runner. You know, you don't go out and run a mile. You know, you kind of start by doing maybe, you know, a quarter mile or whatever. The issue is you build up to obviously where you need to get to. So that's what I did. You know, for me, again, you know, to do a set of 1,000 or, you know, 2,000 is no big deal. For a lot of other folks, they just wouldn't be able to get that or comprehend it. That's where you have to kind of flush them out of your, you know, your memory bank. Figure out what you can do. Build your numbers and then build your sets. So that's how I started. So that's number one. So it's the preparation of being able to do your homework. And then once you have been able to do that, you need to reflect on that and kind of pat yourself on the back that you've been there. You've actually accomplished this and you're in the 1%. So you have to kind of give yourself, you know, credit or kudos, as it were. I don't believe in ego because I always joke and say ego stands for edging God out. But you have to be in that position where you believe in yourself because, you know, quite honestly, there's not a lot of folks that will, you know, carry your torch, as they say. And so that's number one. The going back to what you were saying about, you know, breaking down, sometimes you do have to listen to the body. You know, so if you were in that position where you did a race and your body is basically telling you to slow down or, you know, just pause for a drink of water or something like that, you really do have to listen to your body. You know, sometimes I believe that on given days your biorhythms are in better sync than other days. And so, you know, there's all sorts of different things that go with this. You know, it's one issue that most people never even address, and that's the issue of stress. And so if an individual, you know, is stressed, it's going to kind of come out into their performance. Now, stress is a part of everybody's life. We understand that. But when it becomes overwhelming, it will overtake you and basically drain you of your energy fields. And so for me personally, I get into, you know, I don't want to say, you know, I go Zen, but it's very close to that. It's really an issue of being at peace with myself, you know, kind of covering the mantras of, you know, hey, I've prepared, you know, to 110%. I feel good, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be your own best cheerleader. That's really what it comes down to. Once you prepare and you can become your own best cheerleader and you can eliminate the stress factor, you've got it made.
For sure, yeah. And going back to what you said about preparation, I remember my first Ironman race. I was not nervous at all at the beginning because I knew I was prepared. I knew I could finish the race. And my goal in that case, in the first one, was to finish. I didn't have a time goal.
Right.
So yeah, it's and you're right. There's some days where you're just on. I mean, you're just on fire, and you do things. I mean, you know, some days I'm looking down at my Garmin, I don't know, going, this feels like 30 seconds slower a mile, like the effort level. Like I shouldn't be running this fast. And then almost the thought of me going there is almost a negative. It's like an introduction to a possible negative thought of, maybe I shouldn't be going this fast. Maybe this is going to be bad. Maybe I'm going to pay for this in a mile or two, you know, and then it kind of scare myself out of it.
Right. You become your own worst enemy.
Right. So, okay, so getting back to the sit-ups here.
But let's go back to that thought there for a second.
Sure.
You know, when you said you did your first one and you had no expectations, you were basically relaxed and de-stressed because your objective was to complete it, not to, you know, have a winning time. So a lot of your biorhythms were kind of in sync where you were relaxed. Your your body was in a position of saying, it's prepared, let's just go out and have some fun. I think that that's kind of the key. If you were to overthink it and overstress it, that's kind of when you go through that mental breakdown of devil on one shoulder, angel on the other. And you don't want that. You just want, two angels. I hope that makes some sense.
No, it totally does. And maybe a little bit of perspective. So the last running race I did was a half marathon. And I had a time goal. 2 weeks prior, I had run a similar race and had not met my time goal, but had still had a PR.
Okay. Wow.
And I met a friend at the beginning of the race, an actual teammate, and I was surprised to see her. And she says, "Yeah, I'm just running for fun today. Yesterday, she's training for an Ironman at the end of the month, Los Cabos down in Mexico. Anyway,
okay.
So she's got a lot of miles under her belt. She said, yesterday I had a big day. I was on the bike for a few hours and I swam a bunch of yards, and I'm just gonna cruise today. I want to have fun. And now when I met her at the end of the race, before I met her, I had already found out she had taken third in her age group. And I looked at her time, and I knew it was a PR for her. And so I chuckled a little bit. And when I saw her, I said, somebody had a good day. Somebody got a little competitive. And she said, I didn't know what to expect. I got out there, and I just felt that zip. She said, you feel that zip? You're not going to sit on it. You're going to go. So she had that day, and unexpectedly. And perhaps because, like you said, she didn't have the expectation on herself to go out and PR and do that. So. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah. It's starting to sink in a little bit, and I don't think there's any way but experiential learning on that. You can talk about it all day until you fail a few times.
Yeah. And you hit upon another interesting point there. If I could just expand on it for just 1 second. You said that, a couple of days prior she was doing this and she was doing that, albeit light. My methodology is to, and again, we're not drawing a, direct parallel or comparison, but I believe in active rest. There is a time, prior to my events that I will do nothing. Not exactly sitting around like a Kobe beef, but, the concept is I'm not training the days before, because, what I'm trying to do is build up the energy stores. I'm trying to, kind of zen, as it were. So, and I didn't mean to get off on a tangent on this, but, I believe, several days prior to the event, you shouldn't be doing anything. I mean, you're not going to be losing anything, you're not going to be losing. In fact, you're going to be gaining everything. So I believe in, a couple of days prior to just absolutely relaxing. And I just want to throw that in there.
That's worked really well for me. And everybody's a little bit different. I've heard lots of people like light exercises or pickups or little short sprints, nothing real hard right before. But for me, about 2 days prior, I do nothing, and then I have my best performances typically.
Exactly.
I do play with that a little bit to see once in a while, am I still there, or do I, would I benefit from a little training? And inevitably it goes back to that 2 days for me before a big race to do that. And it's so neat. So okay, great. Getting back to the 11 hours and what was it, 32 minutes
32.
Without going to pee. How do you do it? I mean, you're going through this and you're not going to the bathroom. It seems like at least in a triathlon or something, you've got the elements, wind, the breath exchange, things that are taking liquid out of your system. But you're doing sit-ups. How do you do that?
Yeah, and that's a very great point. That's why after the 20,000, I never did that again. The 25, I did the potty breaks, and I'll tell you why. Because as you know, as we as athletes understand our bodies, and you have to hydrate the bodies, otherwise the muscles cramp up. Mm-hmm. And I remember, so vividly, it was like 17,158, my calf muscle rolled up into a ball as I'm doing these sit-ups. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is killing me. I didn't know where the pain was worse. So, but I kept going, and I, of course I drank out of a biker's bottle, while I was doing these sit-ups just to hydrate the body. But that's the dichotomy between, taking in liquids and then having to go to the bathroom. So I've got to tell you that the toughest part of my sit-up-a-thon wasn't my ass or my back. It was my bladder and kidneys. And the reason, you'll get a kick out of this, the reason that the record is 20,100 is because I had just completed the 20,000, and ABC, NBC, and CBS were coming in with the cameras for the news at night, and they wanted to interview me. And I didn't want to be interviewed in the bathroom. So I just kept going, and that's why it's 20,100. So the extra 100 was really for the camera. I had to go to the bathroom so bad I can't even tell you. When the interview was over, I sprinted, and I swear to God, I must have been going to the bathroom for, it seemed like 25 minutes. It was amazing, but I wouldn't recommend this to anybody because I think my kidney and bladder are still paying for it today. But,
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how we improvise in the moment like that, and
yes.
In the end, people would. It's kind of humorous because people, what you would typically think, gosh, after 20,000 sit-ups, you're done. How could you possibly go on? And yet you were kind of dealing with almost an emergency situation there.
Right.
News comes in. Right. What do you do? What do you do? You kind of make a quick choice and go with it. So kudos to you for going with that. So we talked a little bit about training, but
sure.
But what would you say that the physical training was adequate there, or was it? Was there 20,100 sit-ups or 20,000 sit-ups to train for that? Even though you'd done 15 and you'd done 10 and 5 before that, it's still something that you'd never done. Hadn't really been done consecutively like that before. How did you approach that mentally?
Yeah, well, first off, it was each 5,000 for me was about 3 hours. So the 5 was 3, roughly, and the 6 and the 10 was up to around 6. The 15 was up to around 9, and then of course the 20 was up around 12. So the issue is, I'm thinking in 3-hour increments, and it's an issue. It's almost like a runner in a way, where you're pacing yourself, just like you talked about before. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Well, I might go out at 2,800 an hour, sit-ups, but I would definitely, comb it back to about 1,700 an hour. And again, these are numbers that might not make sense to anybody, but they make sense to me. So I think of it in terms of very much like a marathoner. As far as pacing. And it's very important to me psychologically to kind of get the first, couple hours out of the way, just to kind of bank a couple thousand, straight away. So for me, it was, how to set this thing up mentally. The other thing was, which we haven't really talked about, and it's a really kind of an important issue, it's the issue of nutrition. For a lot of athletes, we focus so much on our ability to do this, that, or the other thing on the track, or whether it be in the gym or whatever. But I believe personally that your nutrition is a huge part of your energy stores, which really convert into your athletic accomplishments. And so I devised for myself personally a methodology of eating that was, for me, and I think for a lot of athletes would be just really spot on. And that's not, and that what it is, it's really eating probably 5 or 6 meals a day, but not eating a lot at those meals. And of course, we as athletes all understand the blend between proteins and fats and carbs. So I won't go into anything there, except that I did try to avoid, simple carbs like sugar, because that stuff can, that'll kill you. But, going back to, getting that blend right, and then just making sure that the meals were, so what it did was it kind of kept my blood sugar level, very, very steady. And it just put me in a very, straight on healthy mood, if you will. I wasn't overeating where you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I ate too much. Or you didn't undereat where you're going, God, I'm starving. You just felt perfect. And that is another part that will go into the, the psyche of the brain, making sure that you've got the right kind of fuel. And I always say you can't run a Ferrari on regular. So, make sure you've got the right kind of, formula.
For sure. And for endurance athletes, it's a huge, huge issue is fueling. So this kind of begs the question, in my mind, if I were going to do sit-ups, I wouldn't even come anywhere near to a small percentage of what you do, but I might be able to do 50, but those, in my mind, that would be more of an anaerobic type of exercise. But it seems that if you're able to do sit-ups for hours on hours and hours, that you're really in an aerobic type of exercise. Would you say that was that more of a training thing? Did you also change your diet to get you to be more of a fat burner, or what was?
Yeah.
How did you prepare for that dietarily?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do believe that it was the sit-ups are a little bit of a blend of anaerobic. So that's just to start with that. But for me, I did a lot of experimenting on what worked for me as far as energy. Keep in mind I'm working down on Wall Street at this time, and that in of itself can stress you out. But thank God I had the Downtown Athletic Club very close to my office. But the issue really comes down to, for what I did and how I experiment, I don't want to necessarily recommend this for all athletes, because quite honestly, I think we're all a little bit different, and I'm also not a certified nutritionist. But what worked for me was a tremendous amount of carb loading. I did a lot of spaghetti. For me, that was a real big plus. And for me, I always felt really good when I had the energy stores, and for me, that's actually what worked for me.
Got it. Okay, so really loading because you knew you were doing some of that anaerobic work. Because I was thinking, how do you do hours and hours and hours of anaerobic work? It just seems metabolically impossible. But
it's funny. It's funny we're talking about this, man, because my hat's off to you for doing the Ironman. I mean, everybody is looking at through a different part of the prism. I think what you do is, I was one of the original guys that did triathlons back in the late 70s when they were first invented. Now, keep in mind, I couldn't even conjure, a full Ironman. These were these little mini things where you swam a mile, and you biked maybe 30 miles, and then you did a 10K or something like that. It was a blast back then, and there wasn't that many guys that were doing them. We were just having fun doing it. In fact, just a little, kind of a quick funny story. We all registered for the Liberty to Liberty Triathlon, where you would go jump into the Hudson, swim around the Statue of Liberty, go over to Liberty Island in Jersey City, get on your bike, and then bike to the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Well, we were all kind of, set up for this thing, and at the last minute I pulled out, well, not last minute, but the last couple of weeks, because they said if anybody's going to participate in this event, you all have to get tetanus shots for what's in the Hudson River. so I said, I don't really want it that bad. So I pulled out, but my buddies did it, and they all kind of, and I'm telling you, there weren't but a couple hundred guys that were in this thing. But it was a blast, and, they had a really good time. But, I enjoyed the line when, getting the tetanus shot. So.
Very true, very true. And by the way, I don't know if they still have that race, but it sounds like a lot of fun. I would love to do that. It sounds like a bucket race to me.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to kind of, with the waves coming down the Hudson, you almost had to, shoot in a different angle just so that the water would take you a certain way. You know what I mean? It was really somewhat of a challenge, I think.
Sure, and a couple of years ago, I think they were handing out swim noodles to people for the New York Triathlon because there were some challenges swimming in the river. Although
Yeah.
I hope it's cleaner these days than it was back then. I'm thinking it probably is a little bit cleaner, but maybe fewer needles and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. So.
Yeah,
now, we talked a little bit about. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just joking about, as long as Sully Sullenberger isn't landing U.S. Air, in the middle of the Hudson there, you're okay. But,
very true, and that would make it even more spectacular, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
There's always an adventure to be had when you're doing a triathlon.
Yes. And I think that's part of it too. You talk about the word adventure, but I think it is a combination of not only adventure but having fun. I think that there's a lot of guys and gals that get a little bit over serious, and they kind of lose perspective on it. This is really about pushing yourself as an individual more than I think it is, anything else. And, so that's a really big, part to keep in mind, that just having some fun.
Very true. Yeah, I find that as I go on in the years in triathlon, that I start to push myself a little more towards time goals, and as I push too hard, I start to lose that joy, and then I kind of get a perspective, and I start making sure I do more trail runs and getting out in the mountains to ride and things like that, where I enjoy those because it brings that joy back, and with that, then the performance starts to come again.
Yes, yeah. The issue is that when you're looking at your times and doing that kind of stuff, what you're doing in technical terms is beating yourself up. And once you start doing that, you're losing perspective on why you're doing this. You're there to push yourself, yes, but you're not there, to set any world records. I mean, you got to have some fun doing what you're doing, because that's to so many others. I mean, that's what takes me, for me, the athletic aspect of this whole thing not only helps me, as an individual, but it helps me in business as well. And I think that's, whatever your other passions are in life, it will actually spill over into it. Do you know what I mean?
Can you expand on that a little bit? We talked a little bit about you helping folks with getting the skills for life and such, but how does that spill over? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, how it all fits together.
Sure. The whole thing, what it comes down to for me, Manny, is that I call it my formula for success. And, if you think of it like a three-legged stool, mental, physical, and spiritual, what happens if one of those legs of the stool isn't there? The stool doesn't stand. So it's how to get your life into balance mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so just as an example, the mental part is time management. I talked about, I've got a section on that, on exactly how to, set up your day. Time management, goal setting, which is a huge part of my life. That's another section. Another section is how to deal with setbacks, because we have many, many more of those than we do successes. But so I talk about that for, quite a while. And then, how to create a PMA, or a positive mental attitude. These are the things that kind of get the mind in sync and working. And then, of course, the physical part is I show kids how to work out with weights or without weights. And, I'm not trying to make any, little bodybuilders, but what I'm trying to do is get them to be happy with their body image, so that their self-esteem and self-confidence, formulates a wonderful base. And then the spiritual part is about leadership. It's about giving it back. It's about paying it forward. So the only thing I ask the kids, I say, when I make you successful, I want you to promise me that you're going to help 2 other kids and make them successful. So, that's really what the formula is really all about. I mean, in very, very short, abbreviated terms.
Yeah, and I like the paying it forward aspect of it, because to me that speaks of that kind of unbroken chain of joy, from handing something down, helping somebody out, and then becoming greater as you help another person out, after you've been helped. So you can share that experience, share that empowerment, and the joy of seeing somebody progress and really grow, under your tutelage or whatever. So that's just such a special part of, I suppose, being human and helping others out. So,
yeah.
You have this YouTube challenge, exercise challenge, and I finally looked at it. You told me about it a while back, and I finally looked at it, and I thought, okay, this is going to be impossible. And then I looked at it; it didn't look so bad,
right.
but then I kind of said, wait a second, I don't know if I'm capable of 50 bench presses at my body weight. Like that just seems,
especially for the fifth exercise when you're exhausted.
Right. So how do you train for something like that? You just kind of do them? Do you have a training plan? What do you do? Has anybody met your challenge yet?
No, not yet. But I always joke and say, how do you do that? I said drugs and mirrors.
There you go.
No, but the truth of the matter is, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. That we all have to understand our own body and what it's capable of doing, and it's a challenge of you against you, and that's the way you have to kind of focus in on it. And the challenge that I have up there, in fact, that's the one I used to qualify for the next American Ninja Warrior NBC TV show. Season 6 called me and asked me to apply, and I think, of course, they wanted a T-Rex, so that would be me.
How could you turn it down? That sounds so fun.
Oh no, I didn't turn it down. I filled out the application for sure. I'm just waiting to hear from them right now. But the challenge is what I call. I just created this thing. It's called my 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 workout, and it's just you start with 10 pull-ups and you go over and do 20 curls with. I think I had 45 in each hand. Then 30 bar dips, which aren't exactly the easiest thing for a lot of folks. And then I did 40 sit-ups with a 45-pound plate on my chest, and then I bench pressed my weight 50 times, all within 5 minutes. So it shows you what you can do and what you can accomplish in really, really a very short amount of time. And that's really what the whole purpose of the little video was all about, how much you can get done in just, because people will always come to me and go, well, Bill, I just don't really have the time to work out.
Right.
So I say, okay, let me show you what you can do in 5 minutes. And of course, they can't even do a pull-up. But the issue becomes you can do a lot of things in a very, very short amount of time, especially as for a T-Rex like myself, it comes down to, my workouts are not that intense. They're more maintenance. And, again, it just depends on where you start and what you accomplish. But you can accomplish some amazing things if you just really, really work out. You have to determine how important is it to you. One of the things that I say when I get on stage and I'm speaking to a very large audience, I say, just out of curiosity, a show of hands, please. How many of you have dreams? And, all the kids will be raising their hands, and I've got dreams like this. And I start out by saying, well, the first words out of my mouth are, dreams are bullshit. Excuse the French. But they're all like looking at me like, oh, my God, how is that possible? And then I say, well, listen, dreams and goals are identical, except for one major thing, that goals have target dates for completion. And that's really what it comes down to, even as we as athletes. We have our goals, but they've got to be written down. They've got to be definable. They've got to have a date of completion, so on and so forth. Otherwise, they're just dreams. Do you know what I mean? And so that's a real big defining issue, with regard to athletes versus non-athletes.
Yeah, and that's huge. This is one of the things when people approach me or I speak with people about getting fit or getting healthier, is to have that reason, and that reason, whatever it is, and then to, in my case, sign up for an event, because that is your timeline. You have that timeline approaching. And I will tell you, when I was training for my Ironman, I was extremely uncomfortable for a number of months, thinking to myself, is it possible that I can even do this? I'm scared. It's coming up. Can I do it?
Yeah.
And that motivated me to train. That really motivated me to train. So, so that by the time I got there, it was, I wasn't worried about it at all. But that fear can really get you going sometimes, I'll tell you.
Well, you just brought up a really interesting point, Manny. There's two issues that can move you forward. One is the desire to succeed, and the other is fear. Both seem to work. For you, the first one was really an issue of fear, but I'd be willing to bet that is no longer the case for you. It was only the first one.
Yep.
Now it's an issue of, succeeding against your own times. So, you had a little bit of a paradigm shift, but it really almost doesn't matter, how you kind of ignited the switch. You did. You know what I mean? But my personal opinion is that, fear isn't the primary thing I would choose as a motivator.
No, I agree. I totally agree. Fear is definitely not my motivator of choice. So the question that comes up in my mind is, how do you say, for me, that fear motivator was much stronger than my other motivator. So how does one switch that level of motivation over to the, I forget what terminology you use for the non-fear-based motivator?
Yeah,
how do you do that?
You don't have to do it. You don't have to do anything. It happens automatically. What happens is the fear kind of gets you to that first one, and then after that, whether you realize it or not, your subconscious has developed a platform or a base of self-confidence and self-esteem that basically says, hey, I can do this. I can kick it fast. I can make this happen. So, consciously, you have basically converted. Your first thing was just showing up, and you did. And then after that, you had the self-confidence, whether you realize it or not, that brought you to that next level that converted you over.
So interesting. So many of these conversations that I'm having are ending up in this mental realm. People want it. They're drawn to what's the special workout, what's the secret, interval training, and what are foods, and all this. But what it really boils down to in the end is, how do you get your state of mind in the proper place to be able to do this? Because you're absolutely right. In my book, in my experience, is that. And this is why I mentioned those races and having a challenge at the end. In my mind, that was an absolute mental challenge. Physically, I was capable of doing it, but mentally, it was like, so it just keeps coming back there again and again and again. And I'm loving this part of it because this is such a learning experience for me. So wow,
well,
you shared. Go ahead.
But and just to end on that note, you're right, Manny. Everybody's looking for the secret sauce. They're looking for that little edge to kind of move them to that next thing. But if they really, really want the answer is YOU. You just have to look in the mirror and make the determination what you can do and what you can't do, what's within the realm of possibility, what you've done before, and believe in yourself. Like I said, we're in a group, you and I and your listening audience of really under 0.5%. We're in a very, very special elite bucket, and I don't mean an elite in a way that people need to throw roses at us, but it's a mindset group that is taking ourselves to another level within ourselves, and that's what it's all about. So we, as a group, are kind of like all members of the same country club, if you know what I mean.
True.
And I think your show is fabulous for all of us sharing, those thoughts and as I call it, the secret sauce that works for each one of us. But I've got to tell you that it's like fingerprints. Each one of us is very uniquely different. Yes, maybe the 35,000-foot view is all the same, but once you get into the dynamics of the details, you really have to look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, very, very wisely spoken. So you teach this stuff. You help other people out to be more successful in both in athletics and in life. How do people get involved in your programs if they either want to have you come and speak or study under you? How do they do that?
They can reach me very simply at billmorris.org, O-R-G. That's my landing page. And really what that does is the landing page kind of has the various things that I do, the total athlete, the success for teens, even the part about me being a professor at the business school here at UCI. And then, of course, my speaking gigs, which are on the, I think it's on the far left-hand side. But I do a lot of speaking at corporations where, whoops. Can you hear me, Matty?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There was just a little beep in the phone. I thought I lost you. I do speaking at corporations, with regard to this exact topic of goal setting and how to make things happen. So, I mean, it's really the same formula for athletes. It's the same formula for businessmen.
I'm in business too, so yeah, I totally get that. So I want to thank you, Bill, for coming and sharing your experience with us today. It's like I said, it's such a treat to hear different people who've accomplished so many kind of a myriad different things, and yet it comes down to the kind of similar building blocks as we talked about. So thank you again for coming and sharing with us.
Anytime.
Yeah.
And if any of your listeners want to reach out to me, it's very simple. It's bill@billmorris.org, O-R-G. And, I answer my own mail. So, feel free to ask any kind of questions or any kind of guidance or whatever. I'm always there.
Awesome. And we'll have those links for everybody as this goes out. So once again, thanks again, Bill. And this is Manny Aragon signing out for the 2014 Endurance Summit. Thanks again, and see you next time.